Hello, everybody. It's the end of day 3 of the Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference. I'm about to go live right now and do a recap of the entire day. So, if you missed a few classes, if you wonder what it was like, what happened, if you're trying to decide whether or not to buy a video pass, now is your chance to see some of the stuff from today's classes, and there were keynotes today. It was a really full day. I actually just left the backstage pass right now. It was going overtime, which is classic for it to go overtime, but I thought I was going to go less overtime today, but I was wrong. Right now, Ray Bonto is playing sitar music in the backstage pass. So this is one more reason. If you've seen my talks about the conference before, I highly recommend going to all of these green. Everything that's marked in green is a social event, and you might think, oh, a social event, that's not that interesting. But for an online conference, it is really interesting because these are the single moments where there's actually the con part of the conference where a lot of people come together and you can hear from people who aren't just the instructors. But let's dive into it for today's classes. I'll show you all of my sketch notes from today. You can see I'm still working on stuff from previous pages. So this is actually a class from Rosalie Hazlett about illustrated essays. And I started working on a separate sheet of paper, but I ended up turning it into like a fold out, which is something that we learned in Verena Hillgardner's class. And I sort of made it a comic poem, and the comic poem was from Grant Snyder's class. So one thing that is a good sign is if you start synthesizing things from multiple classes during the conference and combining them all into one. That's one of the ways to learn is you'll remember things better if you synthesize them in your own way. So that was fun, but today was definitely an exhausting day. We had some challenging classes. Let me get to the beginning here. Here's the beginning. Jack was wearing his really cool whale shirt. I need to go back and add some more details, but the poem for today was called September by Grace Paley. And the only line I got from the poem was, go out with your journal and dance like no one is watching. Actually, no, that was his invitation, but it was a cool poem. Oh, Ashley Oliver Frey art, welcome. Glad you made it to the recap. And then after that, there was a class with Joris de Rate, an amazing illustrator of birds. It was mostly a talk. And so I ended up, you can see in terms of sketch notes, this is kind of a lot of writing and not that many drawings. But I did try to draw the tool that he used, some stuff of him using the digiscoping, the way that he talked a lot about how he looks through his scope to draw the birds. It was a very useful class. There wasn't very much time for us to do a practicum. It was mostly him showing how he goes about it. So if you like that type of wildlife illustration with birds, or if you've seen Joris de Rate's stuff on Instagram or something and you like that art, he also does really precise science illustration of birds. If you're interested in that, it was a very good class. I wish I had some more visual representations from the class, but mostly it was him talking about his method and his approach. And he had a lot of great tips and beautiful paintings. So I just kind of ended up with a lot of words there. The next class was drawing owls with Linda Feltner. Linda Feltner is also a very accomplished artist and science illustrator. And you can see that I worked in pencil, which is what she was recommending, but it doesn't show up on the screen as much. These were quick sketches from videos of live owls that are actually moving. Um, and it was a good class. Let me see if there were any funny quotes that I missed from this one. Yeah, lots of good tips. Both of those classes were very intensive, I would say, and sort of classically foundational art skills where you have to practice a lot, you have to work. So if you take those classes back to back, expect to be tired because it's a lot. It's a lot of drawing. At least in Linda's, you're going to be doing a lot of drawing, and the other one you're going to be listening a little bit more. She also shared some really interesting techniques that she uses for sort of more fine art type stuff, and some really interesting analog uses of tracing paper and transfer paper. And I have all of those supplies that she mentioned, as well as the supplies that Yoris mentioned, in my complete supply list, which I'll post here in the comments. Um, Check it out. I have the complete supply list for that I've been trying to build for this year. It's always interesting to see what different people use at the conference. Different people talk about a lot of materials. It can be confusing. And the next class was actually a talk by Roland Allen. He wrote the book about the history of the notebook. Very interesting. And I enjoyed the talk. He's very funny, and the book's great. I read most of the book before the talk. But one thing that I want to point out is depending on what your goal is, sometimes reading the book before the keynote might not actually be a good thing. So I recommended people read the books before the keynotes, and I found in some cases, especially when authors have just published a book, if they give a keynote, a lot of times their keynote is very, very similar to the content of the book. So if you have issues with attention like me, you might get bored sometimes if the material in the talk is basically just a book report on the book that you just read. I think that depending on the material and your familiarity with the material, or how freshly you just read the book, it could be fine. But I did notice that happening a little bit with both of the keynotes so far that were based on books that I read, but it still had funny stuff. He said, for example, he loved this illustration because it had old underwear being pounded into a pulp by burly men, and then put into vats of urine. So if you want to learn about the history of the notebook and how it applies to naturalist notebooks, you should check out that keynote. It'll be on the recorded version, or you can check out Roland Allen's book on the history of the notebook. It just came out. He talked about Darwin's notebooks. I tried to sketch note the whole thing. And then he was in a conversation with John Muir Laws. That's supposed to be Jack there, with penguin hands. And they had a pretty good conversation. There were some sort of technical difficulties, but it was interesting to hear. Jack asked him, what are the most important practical things from all this history of the notebook that we can apply to make our nature journaling better. And here are a couple of things, and I think these are going to be a little bit controversial for the nature journaling community, or hard to figure out how to incorporate these. But one of the main things that he suggested is to put related ideas on the same page. So I, for example, have filled, this is my 66th nature journal of this sort of format that I filled in the last like 10 or 11 years. And they're all basically chronological. And for most of that time, I just put everything in the same journal until I filled them up. What Roland Allen is suggesting is to have books separated by categories, sort of like commonplace books. And I think that's really, really interesting. And I wonder if there are ways that we can do that with our nature journal. If you think about it, phenology wheels or perpetual journals are sort of doing this. And also the other thing, this is very cutting edge for nature journaling, is recombinatorial journaling. So I mentioned recombinatorial journaling at the beginning of this year as one of the nature journaling techniques that I think is most revolutionary for this year. And I first thought of it, or heard other people talking about it, last year when I saw one of my participants in one of my nature journaling trips. She took all of her nature journals apart and recompiled the pages in different orders. So maybe there's a way that we can do this tip from Roland Allen with nature journals by recombining them. So I know it sounds crazy, ripping up your journals and putting them together in new orders sounds absolutely crazy, but maybe there's some benefits to it in terms of like how you can use it as a resource. The other thing he said is that was the main thing he said. He said he said separate different elements of writing in different notebooks. That doesn't apply as much to nature journaling, but the idea there is that when you pull out a certain notebook, like say I pull out this small sketchbook that I have in my pocket, I know that when I pull this out, this is just for ideas. And I know that when I pull this out, it's for watercolor. And I think what he's saying is that the way that your brain works, if you have certain journals for certain tasks, it's easier when you pull them out. Your brain sort of will automatically go into idea writing mode, or sketching mode, or watercolor mode, or things like that. So I thought that was an interesting idea. And he also thought that digital classrooms were really problematic in the education of his daughter, which was really interesting. She had to go to school with an iPad, and he said it was terrible. The next class after that, this is one of the classes where having the right materials really makes a difference. It was this book arts class with Roseanne Hanson, and it was really fun to create some 3D stuff for that class. So she had a lot of techniques. It was video based, so she didn't do the demos. She played videos of her doing the demos, which is similar to what Yoris did. And I think there's a lot of benefits to that way of teaching. But at the same time, it's a little bit hard if you're trying to keep up with the instructor because they're playing videos and you're actually trying to glue all the things on. But she had some cool ideas that she shared about how to use overlays, how to make these sort of like accordion fold outs or extensions, and how those can actually be cut to have different silhouettes and stuff like that. So that was really interesting. And I tried to take notes about the different techniques she was mentioning. I didn't do the book binding. There was a whole book binding part that she did. I didn't have all the supplies. There was quite a few supplies to do it, and you wouldn't have been able to do it in the time that her class lasted. So that brings me to one point right now, which is if you look at my desk, it's completely covered and stuff. Like I have a huge mess and a ton of unfinished projects that you can see here. Look at all of these unfinished projects. And so I think when you're trying to take all of the classes, it's important to think about how much time you need for actually finishing the projects and to make a plan or be realistic. I also want to take this moment to recommend that you don't just binge watch these and just sort of watch them as entertainment. I think the real benefit of these classes is when you try to get hands on and actually follow with the instructor. And sometimes it might feel uncomfortable. Like I definitely had moments during some of the classes today where I felt tired and stuff like that. But if possible, try to actually engage with the material. And if you need to space the classes out, don't marathon them like I'm doing, so you actually have time to finish the projects. I think I missed one class today. I was trying to put together the supplies list, which I'll post again in the comments. So I missed during the simple watercolor landscapes with Jean Madej, I was trying to update the that that supply list so that you all could find the supplies, because there's been a lot of stuff mentioned this year, and I wanted to make sure that I added it to the list. So I've been working on that. So I missed one class. And then last but not least for today, we had Jack's class. And so it was originally going to be bugs and slugs. And on the supply list, I tried to predict what supplies would be needed for bugs and slugs, but it was changed to butterflies. And I think it's a really cool idea and a really cool story that John Muir Laws told, and a really good class for learning perspective with some really well thought out exercises. He is an expert teacher with a lot of practice and a lot of creative ideas and energy. So it was a really good class and it was fun. It was a little bit challenging for people taking the class live because it was changed last minute and you needed to print something out. So just a heads up, before, if you're going to take it as a video pass, you're going to need to print something out, and it's good if it's slightly stiff paper. I use this resume paper. It's cotton resume paper. It's really fun because it goes through a printer very easily. You can also do some watercolor on it, and it's a little bit stiffer. So that's one. That's one that I used. And I'm going to insert some of these onto my page. So you can see here another page from Jack's class. My energy was starting to fail, but it was a really good class. So here you can see that I've created a little holder thing on the page with just some stiff paper to hold one of my butterfly models. But we made a couple of those so I could theoretically hold those on the page there. And then I also made these fold out triangle things because he was talking about using triangles to study perspective. So see the foreshortening that you can see of these shapes, and then practice drawing those butterfly shapes. So really good class with Jack. And then the backstage pass was really good. It was supposed to end earlier today, but it ended with Ray Bonto playing sitar, which I had always heard that he plays sitar in the backstage pass, even though it's like 3 a.m. in London where he lives. But his parents must be amazing. And I finally made it. So that's my recap for today. Tomorrow I'm going to miss a few classes in the morning because I have to work at another job besides learning about nature journaling and teaching nature journaling. So thanks for tuning in. Super tired. If you're marathoning like me, just so you know, you probably already know this, we are more than halfway through. So only 2 more days left. I'm really sad I'm going to miss Victor Velez's class tomorrow, but definitely check out their supply lists or my supply list and any PDFs that they have on the Sked app before the class so that you'll be ready. All right, everybody. Bye. Good night. Get some rest. Bye.